Hello and welcome to the oddschecker betting show. I'm your host, George Elek, and it's a bit of a different show this time. Rather than previewing certain races or race days or festivals, we are here previewing the whole National Hunt season. This is the Horses to Follow podcast, and I've got two expert guests with me who are going to give us 5 of their horses to follow. First up, oddschecker's very own tipster and ever-present guest on these betting shows, Andy Holding, and also joined as well by Ed Quigley, freelance writer, broadcaster, journalist, all around racing. And the last time the three of us sat down and spoke, it was ahead of the Cheltenham November meeting, and I think you guys had a pretty good weekend.
It didn't go too badly, did it?
Yeah, 1 or 2 high spots. I thought it was tough going. I think we both got one thing right anyway, for sure, and that was the rain that was going to fall was going to make life a little bit more difficult on the Saturday into Sunday. And as it turned out, it rather scuppered my project in the Paddy Power, Mr. Fisher, who I think we probably haven't seen the best of yet. I think he'll be better on better ground. But the Sunday meeting was a little bit trickier, a bit unedifying, and even put the kettle on my sort of champion chase long-term pick was made to sort of struggle in that ground. I think Bravery got her home. So yeah, I think that form for that Cheltenham weekend, I think could be a little bit less strong as it probably would be in previous years.
And Ed, you live just a stone's throw away from the course. Were you standing on the roof trying to get a look as they were coming up the hill?
Not quite, but I have done before. It all depends on the time of the year. I could see the back of the stand. In the winter, the trees go bare. I can actually see through to the racecourse. But in the summer, yeah, it's kind of blocked off. But no, it was a good weekend. Obviously, on the blind side, I advised at double figures.
Yes,
he won well. He was quite well backed on the day. Looked his old self off a kind of career low handicap mark, if you like. But a little bit like Andy in the big one on the Saturday, Slate House ran absolutely deplorably. I mean, he was beaten after 4 fences, so something clearly amiss there. And waiting to hear a bulletin from the Tizard team. But all in all, it was good stuff. But yeah, the rains did arrive, and we say there could be a few muddling form lines going forward, but I've been saying this for the last 3 or 4 years, and we've had the same ground in March as we've had in November, and the kind of form lines have held true to some extent. So, but nonetheless, it was exciting stuff. And very quickly, the 2-mile chase division, I'm actually starting to get really excited about now. We've put the kettle on. You've obviously got Altior, Politalon, Granatine all meeting in 10 days' time or 2 weeks' time at Sandown as well. So it's all really starting to bubble up in the 2-mile showpiece event.
Everything's starting to bubble away nicely in the National Hunt season. And it's worth pointing out here as well that, you know, the horses you guys have picked out aren't necessarily the headline grabbers. These are horses that are on your radar to keep an eye on. But Andy, you know, for those people who've been reading your column on oddschecker and have been backing certain horses anti-post, you know, the reason why we're not talking about those horses today is just because you've looked for, you know, not a value necessarily, but maybe some horses that have gone under the radar that you haven't already spoken about.
Well, that's the whole essence of this particular list that I've drawn up. I could have easily gone for the ones I've already tipped and mentioned, you know, your Cider Burleys, your Manella Indos, Put the Kettle On and stuff like that. All those are doing really well. They've won their first races. They're on track for their respective targets at the end of the season. But I've tried to step outside the box and think of perhaps at least 3 or 4 emerging and up-and-coming stars among the ranks that, in all fairness, probably not too many UK punters would have even noticed or heard of even. They've gone very much under the radar. So I am going to throw in a couple more that should give you a little bit of fun anyway throughout the winter.
Well, we'll start with you, given that you've just said half the horse's name by mistake there. And we'll kick off with your first pick, which is Imperial Aura for Kim Bailey. Obviously, the winner of the handicap chase at Cheltenham in March and won on reappearance at Carlisle. Entered this weekend on Saturday for a very hot race at Ascot. So what is it about Imperial Aura that you see being so exciting and one to watch?
I just think his jumping is second to none. I've watched him a few times now, and he's everything you want in a National Hunt horse, or particularly a chaser. He hardly ever hesitates when he comes to a fence. He attacks it. I think he's got the perfect jockey to complement his aggressive way of riding, i.e. David Bass from the front, or likes to race prominently. He doesn't have to lead. I mean, he didn't necessarily lead all the way at Cheltenham. And he took his time on his debut at Carlisle. But if you watch him sometimes on the side-on shots, he was absolutely devastating. I mean, he take off outside the wings. He's very clever when he gets in short. I just like the way he's progressing. I mean, I followed him last season all the way through to Cheltenham when he won the Close Brothers, and that form has stood the test. With Galvin ranking it and several others down the line. Even Daily Tiger, I think it was 10th or 12th, won a very competitive race at Puncherstone over the weekend. So it's rock solid form, and I'm quite glad he actually didn't end up running in the Paddy Power. I thought that was maybe the early season target when I was sort of following his early season entries. He got entered in the race, but as it turned out, I don't think he really would have been wanting a slog. I think Kim's done the right thing and looked for these conditions races now. I think you mentioned he goes to Ascot Saturday, and then maybe races like the Peterborough Chase, all gearing up to, as it stands at the moment, in and around that 2.5 mile division, the Ryanair. I mean, things might change. He might end up going down the Gold Cup route if he looks as though he's going to stay further, or he gets beat over 2.5. But for now, I think he's definitely one I want to keep on side for all those 2.5 mile condition races over in this country, because usually he'll get a small field and he's jumping in the way he likes to be ridden. He's always going to make him very hard to beat in those races.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the possible festival target, 16 to 1 for the Ryanair, 50 to 1 for the Gold Cup. I mean, it does look like a hot race on Saturday. I mean, a very small field at the moment. 4 are in Imperial Aura, Itchy Feet, Black Corton and Real Steel. I mean, at this stage, what do you want to necessarily see from these horses you're putting up? I mean, would you be too downhearted if Imperial Aura doesn't finish in front, or is it kind of a long-term project and you just want to see a continued progression?
I think I think he'll be favourite to beat those 3. I haven't seen any better yet. But
yeah,
they're all, they're all respected. Real Steel's a good horse in his own right. Obviously now changed stable. Itchy Feet, we're waiting to see what he can do first time back. And these are good markers. They're good horses. They're 150 rated horses, but I don't think they've got the scope or the necessarily level of improvement that Imperial Aura has got. And I think he will make all the running or go very close to making all the running at Ascot. I think the track will suit him fine. And then, like I said, we'll see what he's made of this weekend, and then we'll take a view afterwards. But I wouldn't say I'd be amazed if he gets beat. But yeah, it would be certainly a bit of a disappointment given the high regard I hold him in.
Well, Kim Bailey's certainly a trainer in very, very good form at the moment. And another trainer in form is Colin Tizard. And Ed, your first pick is Fiddlerontheroof.
Indeed. The angle I've tried to come through here is, 4 of the 5 picks anyway are with the Cheltenham Festival in mind, and the aim of being 20 to 1 or bigger, or at least some horses at prices, shall we say.
Yeah, of course.
You have the scope to shorten significantly, shall we say. And then I've picked one who's a handicap I'll come on to later. But Fiddlerontheroof, I'm a bit shocked. He's still 33 to 1 to win the Marsh Chase, personally. A little bit baffled, especially when you look at the tried and tested oddschecker grid for the Marsh Chase, and of the 30 horses ahead of him on the grid, he's number 31 now. I reckon there are only 6 who potentially line up in the contest. The other 24 are either confirmed by their trainers as staying over hurdles, or already reappeared over hurdles, or it's very obvious they're going to totally different trips. Or, for example, Galvin is shorter, and I think Gordon Elliott said he's now going straight to the National Hunt Chase, for example. This horse was a Grade 1 winner as a novice hurdler. The wheels kind of came off in spectacular fashion, didn't they, in the Supreme, when there were a few things that were wrong with it. A lot of the Colin Tizard horses were totally out of form by the time the festival came along. Perhaps that horse was a little bit over the top as well. And I also just feel that 2 miles was on the sharp side for him. That was my kind of concerns beforehand. I think 2.5 is definitely going to be his trip. And I was really impressed by the manner in which he jumped, would be the key point, I'd say. He was beaten on his comeback at Foster Aspine, if the cap fits, when he finished ahead of Emerton, but he jumped very well. And then again, Exeter last time out on ground, which would have been quick enough for him. I mean, I gather they were almost thinking about pulling him out. Robbie Powell said the ground was almost riding good. But he took his chance over 2-3 at Exeter. And again, his jumping was wonderful. And he looked beaten by the Fergal O'Brien horse coming to the last. And yet he threw in another spectacular leap and knuckled down and kind of rallied back and got up on the line. The Marsh Chase will be another furlong. Hopefully a bit of cut in the ground, a bit more. And I just think he's on an upward curve. He's unexposed. And he's just looked really impressive at the moment. And as I said, obviously you've got your likes of the Envoy Allens, etc. at the top, which kind of are going to suck in a lot of the market attractions you'd expect. But you start going through it and I start saying to people, well, who actually, out of all these horses that are priced up, do you actually see lining up in this gig? And Colin Tizard said that they're going to aim for the Dipper as the next kind of big target, then the Scilly Isles, and then the Marsh Chase. They think in time he will get 3 miles, but he's almost going to take that lost in translation route from a couple of years ago, isn't he? Really, with the Sandown and then on to Cheltenham. But I just am surprised he's as big as he is. His actual bare form is nothing spectacular yet over fences, but it's the potential I like combined with the price. And as I say, given he's a Grade 1 winner as a novice hurdler, I just thought 33-1 still seems a bit bizarre, considering he's jumped beautifully and he's the same price as he was before he jumped to fence in public. So that would be my angle in with him. Would not shock me at all that if he turns up with all 4 legs intact and kind of continues his progression, he goes off single figure price in 3.5-4 months time. And as I said, a little bit of softer ground. I think the Dipper at Cheltenham, soft ground, would be absolutely tailor made for him. So. Yeah, if the Tizard team can have a good spring, I wouldn't be too surprised if he was lining up as one of the protagonists for the 2.5 mile showpiece event for the novices at the festival.
Just a quick question for Ed, actually, while
absolutely
in my mind, George, if that's okay. What do you make of Fiddlerontheroo's performance in last year's Supreme? He was one of my main fancies. I must admit, I was absolutely devastated by how badly he run. Do you put that down to him perhaps been over the top by then, or was it just indicative of how Colin Tizard's ran in general terms at the festival?
I think a combination of both, really. I mean, it was so bad. It was, just put a line through. I was watching a replay of the Supreme the other night, and I mean, he beat him 5 out. I mean, Robbie Power's getting it. I mean, it was so bad to be true, wasn't it? And you couldn't say the ground was an excuse, because when he won the Tolworth and galloped clear, Robbie Power got off, said he absolutely devoured the ground. So the Tizard team was, I mean, I think I touched upon it the other day. In the RSA chase, he had the 2 highest rated novice chasers over 3 miles in the country in Copperhead and Slate House. And if Slate House had stayed up, he would have the last 2 finishers in the RSA chase. And yet he had the 2 highest rated horses. That was just a kind of, the mantra really for the Tizard team at that festival. Whatever reason, just things did not fire. I mean, Lost in Translation is the only horse that ran any kind of race, really, wasn't he? At least kind of troubled the judge. So, yeah, it was a very poor performance, and that would worry to some extent. But I'm happy. I'm a forgiving type. 1 bad run I can forgive, if you see what I'm saying. 2 bad runs, you do start the question. But it was so bad, I wouldn't take it on face value, is my view. And I just thought he looks like a proper chaser. He's enjoying fences, and I think 2.5 a bit of soft ground. And if he gets to the race, he's going to be at least a quarter the price he is now. And obviously, if he wins a Dipper, he jumps right up there. So, yeah, 33-1 in all. I've put my money down, and we'll see how far it goes.
Yeah, I'm yet to have an anti-post bet. I'm pretty quickly realising that because of being the host of this podcast, that is unlikely to be the case at the end of the day. You made a good case there, and I guess the good thing is, that run in the Supreme was too bad to be true. And even though the form of the last 2 runs isn't spectacular, it shows a kind of a return to some passable form, doesn't it, as well? A retention of that ability.
And just very quickly in terms of the trip, because obviously since the Marsh Chase came along, it's muddied the waters in terms of anti-post, but they keep banging out this. He's the 2.5 miler. He's the 2.5 miler. And I do kind of like that early season commitment. And I know plans can change, but given that they've got Eldorado Allen, it appears to be his 2 mile candidate, and I believe they've got Alexia Denutz, who was a decent hurdler, who's due to make his 2 mile novice chase debut soon as well. It seems like they've got the Tizards have got their 2 mile kind of stock. And then it sounds like the big breakaway is going to go for the Corto Star novices on Boxing Day. So he almost looks their RSA kind of path. So given that they like to try and keep things split up, it looks the natural race for him as well when you start taking in trainer and owner politics. So I think he's a 2.5 miler. And as I said, 33-1, I firmly believe he's overpriced.
Great stuff. Fiddlerontheroof there, the first one for Ed. The next 4 for Andy, I've got them in front of me. And there's a very Irish theme to them. And, Andy, the king of the novice hurdles, there are 3, I think, we're going to be coming up to. But first of all, a horse that we last saw, Ballymore, the big Getaway for Willie Mullins, finished 3rd behind Envoy Allen. Not seen since, and no entries as it stands at the moment, Andy. So the floor is yours. What's getting you excited? I mean, obviously that form behind Envoy Allen is pretty much as good form as you can really have. But where do we expect to see him next?
Well, I was going to put Envoy Allen in this when I sent you my original list, George, and I thought, come on, Andy, you can do better than that. Everyone in the world knows how good Envoy Allen is. You don't need me to sit on there and waste 5 minutes of your podcast time. So I thought, well, I'll think outside the box and not go for the obvious. I just really want to get with the Envoy Allen form in general. I mean, Envoy Allen clocked the fastest time I got of the whole festival last year. Furlong per furlong, he was the best horse. He's just probably the best horse in training, isn't he? Pound for pound, I think if you're using a boxing terminology. He's just all class, and I don't expect him to be beaten over fences this season unless he falls or something goes wrong with him. But the form of that Ballymore hurdle leads me on to the big Getaway. He was the one that ensured that tempo is strong, and he was the one that ensured that Envoy Allen had to work really hard to win that Ballymore. Everyone's expecting to win stylishly on the bridle, look on there and swoop up the hill. Yes, he did win impressively in the end, but it was only at the last really that he took full control. And the big Getaway, in the end, just faded on the running, but he went a hell of a gallop and he made sure, like I say, that everything was pushed through the pain barrier. And we've seen the full workout well already. Envoy Allen is one bolted up. Easy work. Won on his chasing debut at Navan. I think it's Tizard's, another one, the one that won at Cheltenham the other day.
Big breakaway.
Big breakaway. I always get those two mixed up. He's won. I mean, it was a stellar race, run at a fast time, and everything has won out of it so far. So I'm expecting the big Getaway when he does make his chasing debut to win and win impressively. Now, obviously, Willie Mullins are going to have a whole embarrassment to riches in that particular department. We've already seen a couple, put down a mark unexpected, one very easily at Tipperary, and he's got one this afternoon that runs in the first race at Thurles, which have all been mooted as a possible RSA stroke. Good novice chasers going forward at the Cheltenham Festival. But I think they haven't got as much scope as this fella. If you look at him, he's an absolute giant of a horse. And he went into that Ballymore very much last year under the radar in the sense he hadn't run any very. I thought when I saw him at single figure price, I thought, I can't have this horse on my mind. He's done no numbers whatsoever. But that didn't stop him running a career best. And I think that's kind of background platform that he's got to build on going forward. Should do him the world of good this season. So couldn't go do a list like this without putting a Willie Mullins horse in there. And I think this one has probably got the most potential of his young novices coming through the ranks.
We've got another one to come on to in a second as well. And just looking through, I mean, also sixth in the Ballymore as well with Shan Blue for Dan Skelton, who's won his first two chase starts by 30 lengths combined.
Form, isn't it? It's just, and they've all won their novices chase, and they've all been massively impressive as well, haven't they? They haven't just scrambled out, and they've all battered good horses as well. You know, Envoy Allen beat a decent field. Easy work had to beat another good horse. I think it was one of Jez O'Brien's on the day. So it's but I say Envoy Allen's like 4-1 favourite to win the Marsh Chase or whatever, but you can still get a decent price about the big Getaway for the RSA Chase, and I reckon that's the race he'll go in.
Very interesting. One to keep an eye on for when the big Getaway gets an entry and runs first time out over the bigger obstacles. Now on to Ed's second pick, and we'll talk about a Willie Mullins hurdler, Alexa Dane, who's also got some form behind Envoy Allen.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, whereas Andy's been rightfully flagging up the Ballymore form lines, has been concentrating on the Supreme form lines, and this is another one. Obviously, Fiddlerontheroof we mentioned, he ran below par in the Supreme. Alexa Dane, fascinating really, because going back to this time last year, I was digging out the pre-season quotes from Willie Mullins, in which he thought he'd have a very useful staying novice hurdler on his hands. That was the kind of lines about him, and they clearly were thinking that way because you're running over 2.6, 2.5, but he was just far too keen. He would be pulling the jockey's arms out for half those races. And I remember on the eve of the festival, it said there'd been a big discussion. They're going to drop him back to 2 and just almost let him go. And watching that Supreme Novice Hurdle back again, all the talk in the aftermath was all about Captain Guinness, it appeared, and how Captain Guinness crashed out and got brought down. And there was absolute bumper carts, wasn't there, as the race warmed up in the final with 3 to go. Asterion Forlonge started to dive violently right at all his obstacles, causing absolute carnage. And all we appeared to hear in the aftermath was about how unlucky Captain Guinness was. Well, watching that race back again, I think Alexa Dane is going just as well as anything in the field, including Abracadabras at the time when he gets absolutely knocked sideways and taken out. And he's going over fences. He's 33 to 1 for the Arkle. And I thought it's really interesting. He's entered up at 2 miles at the weekend on Sunday, I think it is, a novice chase at Navan. And again, if you look at him, in the paddock. He's got the size and scope to be a proper chase. And of course, it doesn't always quite translate to that. But as Alistair Down says, he says there's just more of a horse to get in the way of the fence when you get that big. And I kind of know what he means. But he's clearly not devoid of pace, because he was running the best race he'd run all season at the point of his departure in the Supreme. He's a quirky sort, but again, he's 33 to 1 for the Arkle. He dots up on Sunday in a 5-runner novice chase, and suddenly, the kind of anti-post bandwagon starts to build, doesn't it? But I just thought a lot of the talk was about Captain Guinness, and perhaps Lexadeno was overlooked. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if he improved for a fence. And as I say, he's a quirky sort, clearly not devoid of pace. I think 2 miles would be his trick. In fact, he's ended over 2 for his chase debut. Kind of makes me think they put the staying idea on hold for now until they need a reason otherwise, if you see what I'm saying. And again, he's a 33 to 1 shot. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if his price headed south with a nice performance on chase debut.
Another 33 to 1 shot there for Ed. And I always think when you've got horses who, especially in kind of that kind of company, who've run well and fallen, sometimes it's not factored into their prices going forward, because, the form reads 2-5F, but actually the reality of that F is a far better run than, that you have to kind of dig into as well. So the big Getaway is Ed's second one, and 33 to 1 for the Arkle, as he mentioned. And Alexa Dene is entered on Sunday for chase debut at Navan. So keep an eye out there, the 145 at Navan. Andy, on to you next. And as I mentioned, we've got a few interesting novice hurdlers now, and we'll stick with the Willie Mullins team for a filly with form figures of 1-1-1. She wears it well.
She does very well, yeah. I think this is the one I'm probably most excited about. I think most UK punters would have probably seen her just the once, because her two, a bumper win and a Sligo novice hurdle win, don't really amount to a great deal, and they took part in the sort of summer jumping campaign. But on the day when this mare won at Tipperary, we had a good marker with how good she could be, or certainly us time figure buffs had a good marker, because it was on the same day when St. Roy won the Grade 3 hurdle. I think, I'm not sure it was the Grimes hurdle. So obviously 2 races over 2 miles, 2 classy races. And I put the clock on both of these two from when they jumped the hurdle in front of the stands all the way around to the finish line. And she wears it well, absolutely slaughtered St. Roy, and never came off the bridle to do so. And I was like, wow, this is some machine. How good she could be, I don't know. Whether she stays in her own lane, I don't know. She'll definitely, if she does stay in her own lane, they might as well give her the novice mares race. She's that good. I've got a sneaky feeling they might try and dip their toe in and run her against the boys in the up-and-coming Raw Bond in Fairy House in a couple of weeks' time. She's going to face a good field in that race, because another one of the horses I could have put in this list is potentially going to run in that. It's called Ballyadam. Shively Park horse, who got beat on debut in a bumper at Navan, and then has won twice since in a bumper at Downwall, and then over hurdles on debut the day and clocked a very good time. So she's going to face some stern opposition, but if my time figure or my stopwatch hasn't broken, and if you compare her to what she did against St. Roy, and we know what St. Roy's capable of, as we saw in the Morgiani the other day, was arguably a little bit unlucky not to beat Abracadabra, then I do think this is potentially a Grade 1 horse. I'll be amazed if she doesn't make the grade. You can actually get 25 to 1 for the Supreme Novices Hurdle, which is very tempting. If she does win the Raw Bond, everyone will be all of a sudden looking, thinking, oh my God, because Ballyadam's favourite. And I reckon there won't be much between these two in when the betting comes out for the Morgiana. I think it'll be sort of 6-4 the one, 7-4 the other. I'd love to know that sort of preview or get the inside information to know which route they're going to go down. But the fact that she's in the Raw Bond certainly suggests to me that they are thinking big with this filly. Like I say, it was a toss-up between Ballyadam and She Wears It Well, but She Wears It Well has done the numbers, and I think she could have the measure of quite a few of the boys during the rest of the season.
She Wears It Well, 6 to 1 for the mares novice, 25 to 1 for the Supreme. You probably can't go too far wrong, kind of Dutching estates between the two. I wouldn't have thought. I mean, if
Well, I mean, there's a lot of firms do contingency bet now where you can back a horse to win a Cheltenham Festival race. If you was to get it split down the middle, let's say you were offered 10 or 12 to 1, then you haven't got to worry, have you?
No.
She gets beat in the raw bond. You've got a nice price for the mares because they'll probably go down that route. And then if she wins, you've lost out on the bigger price, but you've still got a fair bet because I think she'll be favoured if she wins the raw bond. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing her next week. See what she can do. I hope she doesn't let me down. The clock says she won't let me down. I always believe in the numbers.
I can tell when you're excited by a horse, Andy, and she certainly has that twinkle in your eye. Ed, now for your third pick, a horse who's never been out of the 3 in his 11 starts and finished second in the Supreme back in 2019, Thomas Darby.
Yeah, I've gone for a left of field selection here with the Stayers hurdle in mind. He's currently trading at 80 to 1. And he's just listened to Olly Murphy's comments, essentially, where they said, look, the horse just did not enjoy fences after a very good novice hurdle season. It has to be said, as you mentioned, when placed in the Supreme things. The horse just did not take to the big obstacles at all. So they kind of rerouted over hurdles, and he won a nice pot over 2.5 at Ascot back in January on very soft ground off top weight. That was a decent performance, giving away a lot of weight to some decent types that day, but galloped on in the closing stages. Underperformed at Fontwell. I think that race came too quick, and then obviously was put away type of thing. Now, came back recently at Aintree, and I was really impressed with the reappearance. The horse was a massive drifter in the market beforehand, and I was trying to work out why. Well, then I'd missed the interview with Olly Murphy 10 minutes before, basically said this, that the horse will definitely need the run today, which is why I think it appeared that there was a bit of a late-minute walk. Nonetheless, he still acquitted himself really well. Was in there pitching at the closing stages, and Olly Murphy said words to the effect of, look, we're getting him right today, then we're going to step him up to 3 for the long walk at Christmas at Ascot, of course, which he's got very good form at, and we'll kind of test the water. And I just wonder whether he is totally unexposed to other hurdles, and he's shaping more and more like a stayer. In his early days, he was very keen, he was quite headstrong, and I think that almost forced them to the 2-mile route, if you like. As he's getting older and as he's starting to relax, he's conserving his energy a bit more over longer trips. And again, it's a totally left fielder one, and you've got to take a little bit of a pinch of salt, but also respect the fact Olly Murphy, a lot of his horses have been coming on for their reappearance. He pretty much flagged up the horse will need his reappearance, his first run in 8 months or whatever. And they've clearly got this aim in their mind that they will go up over the 3-mile route. And if he goes to Ascot, takes a Lisnagar Oscar next month and kind of, at least gives him a race to think about and comes home in his postcode, every horse has his price. And I'm just looking for something outside the top 4 or 5 of the protagonists, your Cider Burleys, your McFabulouses, your Paisley Parks. So there often is something that comes from somewhere. And I was going through the list, and I just thought there's so many horses in there that literally either got no intention of ever going near a Stayers hurdle, priced up at 33 to 1, for example. Yet you've got the trainer saying we're going to see if he can make up to a Stayers hurdle candidate, trading at 80s. Now, whether he's good enough or not, we don't know. But official figures only leaving him at £8-10 behind, which isn't a great deal really if he improves 4 step up in trip. So again, it was a price dependent selection, this, in the fact he is 80s, and if he can ruffle up Lisnagar Oscar, whoever else turns up to Ascot a couple of days before Christmas, again, that will kind of confirm their thoughts that perhaps is the route we will continue to go down. But there are some really exciting horses in that 3-mile division. Obviously, some fancy Cider Burley that's obviously got all the Cheltenham form in the world in the book and made a really pleasing comeback recently. But again, the horse that's 10 times the price, the train seems to be aiming that way. I'm gonna throw a dart at him because I wouldn't be at all shocked if he ran a big race at Ascot next month.
Andy, let's bring you in there because as kind of Ed mentioned, you've got Cider Burley in there as well. These are all horses that you'll know a lot about. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a one-horse race, isn't it, boys?
yeah.
I must admit, I was absolutely dumbfounded that Cider Burley managed to win over 2.5 miles. He rather took me aback. It just shows you how good he is and how good that Stayers hurdle, that Per Temps final, that 4 miles. They almost should have put them the other way around and put the title of the Per Temps final on the Stayers hurdle and the Stayers hurdle on the Per Temps, because the quicker race by about 30 lengths was the handicap. And as we've seen so far, the frailties and the brittleness of that Stayers hurdle has been very much borne out. The fact that Ronald Pump, who was second in the Stayers hurdle, was going to be battered by Cider Burley when he fell at the last of the day at Navan, and that was over 2.5. If ever he was going to beat Cider Burley, that was his chance first time out when Sir de Burley was going to be a bit rusty. But I love the way he travelled and I love the way he stayed on him. You know, he doesn't do a lot when he's in front side of Burley. He's never going to go and win 10 lengths, and you're never going to think, oh, God, wow, impressive that was. He always does enough, but there's always loads left under the bonnet. I've been on the receiving end of side of Burley twice at Cheltenham. He's an absolute nightmare of a horse. He's off the bridle at the top of the hill. All of a sudden, he comes back on it again. And then before you know it, he's literally like laughing at them, saying, well, where's everyone else? He's got an incredible engine. And I just can't see him getting beat all the way through the season. And I don't see a horse in England good enough to beat him. At the moment, I don't know where they are in Ireland. If they are, they're underneath a rock somewhere. I still think he's an amazing prize. I don't think he's got the credit for what he did the other day or for what he did at Cheltenham. It's as if I've been banging this drum for like so long. And I'm almost talking to myself because I think he should be a very short price favourite. I do respect Paisley Park. You know, I'd be foolish to write him off completely. But I think he's the only one capable of a wow moment.
Andy, I mean, I'm just looking through, but Fabulous is the one big question mark horse. I suppose he's got the potential to jump 10, 12 pounds.
Yeah, but he could still be. You put him into the. He could be anything category. But look, he only beat Courton Bold, didn't he? And Courton Bold, let's face it, with the greatest respect to him, he's a decent summer jumping horse. Probably an overrated one on an inflated 145 horse. His number was okay at Chepstow, but he's got to go and do it. He's got to go and do it at Cheltenham. He's got to do it on soft ground. He's an easy moving horse. I don't think he's the type of horse that will slog his way through soft ground. If he got what Cheltenham had last year, he wouldn't handle it. Whereas Cider Burley's won on good, he's won on heavy. He's just got everything. Look, I've waxed lyrical about this horse enough. I'd probably have to leave the country if he didn't win the stable.
So at least you'd have to get a picture of him behind you in the room, wouldn't you?
I've got a few spaces around there, and Cider Burley's definitely going to be wedged in amongst them.
Fingers crossed that as of March onwards next year, for all of these podcasts, there's a picture of Cider Burley behind your head, Andy. It feels like you've just given us one of your 5 to follow, but you haven't. So we're staying with you now. I mean, he was, as we say, he was on your initial list before we thought maybe you had to think outside the box a bit. Next up is a horse who's probably the best named horse in training in Holy Macapony for Henry de Bromhead, who won a maiden hurdle last week at Punchestown very impressively. And knowing you, Andy, I'm guessing the clock agreed.
Very much so, George. Yeah, again, another one that a little bit under the radar, just the one run, one win. He'd won a point-to-point fairly comfortably, but those point-to-points don't really amount to a great deal. It's only what they do on the track, of course, which tells you what we need to know about him. But it was a good race. There was some good, well-fancied horse in that. Willie Mullins, favourite. I can't remember its name now. Ended up finishing second, got well beat. But I love the way this horse just ground out a result. He reminded me very much, before they came household names, of Minella Indo and Monolly. That kind of horse, obviously it's with the same colours, the horse with the same colours, so you tend to think like that anyway, but he's just built like them. He looks a chasey. And I think if I had to nominate him now, I'm trying to split my 3 novice hurdlers apart here. I hope She Wears It Well stays down the 2 mile route. And I'm hoping this horse goes up to the Albert Bartlett route, because my 5th choice, I'm hoping will be somewhere in between in the 2.5 mile route. But he looks all stamina. I'd suggest the Albert Bartlett would be his race now. But his time figure was the best I've got so far this season in the novice hurdle ranks. So a very exciting horse, trained by a guy which I always have a huge amount of time for, particularly when it comes to the Cheltenham Festival. He always has at least 2-3 winners there every year. And hopefully, Holy Macapony can be another one for him in that division. I'm not sure what price he is for the Albert Bartlett, but he'd be an interesting horse to stay on the right side of.
He's 20 to 1 for the race at the moment, and it's one of those difficult conundrums where you're backing a horse that's only had one run over in Ireland, and the 20 to 1 for a novice hurdle race. in November doesn't seem overly generous. But then at the same time, I mean, anybody who's watching this or listening to this for the first time, Andy's record with these races is pretty phenomenal, given the reliance on what you can learn from the times themselves. I mean, would you be interested in that 20s, or would you want to sit tight and kind of see how the season develops?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I trust my own judgment. And obviously, the clock's telling me he's a good horse, and he can run very fast for 2.5 miles. He's obviously got to go and do that now, but in a better grade. I think they've nominated a grade 2 over 2.5 miles for him next at Navan, and that tells us a little bit more about him. Whether he ends up being just a down that 2.5 miler, I don't know. Monolith's always been in and around that category for me. He's never really quite looked as though he's an absolute dyed in the wall 3 miler, albeit he's good running the Gold Cup last year. I'd take that on board, but he's always looked to me like he's got more speed than he has stamina. And I'd need another run with this horse to tell me whether he is a 3 miler or 2.5 is about as far as he wants to go. But he run really fast for 2.5 miles first time off the shelf, and he's the 3 mile point to point winner. So he's not going to be short stamina either.
Very interesting one to keep an eye on. Next for Ed is a horse who I think everybody who's interested in national hunt racing is desperate to see his reappearance in Fakir Du Dairy. He's, of course, second in the Arkle behind Put the Kettle On, miles clear of Rouge Viv, and that form looks very interesting indeed.
Oh yeah, spot on. That was my first point, really.
Sorry.
No. You're quite right. You saved me rattling on. But we mentioned the Ballymore, how that form has worked out pretty much the best of any festival race. The Arkle's not looking too shabby at all now, is it? Good performance from Put the Kettle On ground she didn't particularly enjoy, and Rouge Viv absolutely hacked up off 156 in a handicap. So I think that form's pretty strong, and in some ways he's a little bit forgotten, Fakir Du Dairy. And so I see he's entered over 2 miles at the weekend. But the interesting angle was coming through here was with the trip in mind, and he's 20-1 for the Ryanair Chase. I just think that could end up being his natural race. I know he's over 2 at the weekend, but listen to Jose O'Brien's quote saying, I think in time the intermediate trips are going to we'll run here and probably head to the John Durkan in 3 weeks, which is obviously stepping back up to 2.5 miles. And the one time he has run over 2.5 miles, he won a Grade 1 when he won the Drinmore. Okay, you can argue perhaps got a little bit lucky when Sam Crow tipped up, but nonetheless was in the process of running a huge race at the time of that horse's departure. And I just think every race I've seen him over the minimum trip, even going back to his Supreme run, he almost hits a flat spot and then gets going far too late. And not to quite an extravagant extent, but that almost happened a little bit against Put the Kettle On in the Arkle. I thought coming to the last, I thought Put the Kettle On was just going to power clear and go away. And again, he almost hits a little bit of flat spot, jumped you kind of jumped and then picked up again and did, to his credit, go up the hill pretty well. I think 2.5 miles is definitely going to be his trip. Jose O'Brien seems to be indicating they're going to go for that happy hunting ground, like the Imperial Aura route of Ireland, if you like, shall we say. And I'd be surprised. I noticed he has been given a King George entry. I'd be shocked if they went the 3 mile route so soon. Yeah, too soon in season. And I think stretching out 3.25 in just 3.5 months' time for the Gold Cup is probably extremely unlikely. There is every opportunity, of course, they could stick to the 2 mile route, especially if the horse comes out, bolts up over 2 at the weekend. And given that connections have got definitely the Sawyer, who has now started to disappoint a little bit, the McManus team may kind of shuffle the pack and revisit plans. But if I've ever seen a horse I thought would be natural for 2.5 at Cheltenham, this is a horse that I think his form figures at Cheltenham are 1, 4 and 2, including, placing the Grade 1 at the Cheltenham Festival. The track clearly holds no fears. Soft ground holds no fears, which is almost the norm at the festival, it seems, these days. And I would just like to see him up in trip. So put it this way, if he gets turned over at short price this weekend of a 2, I wouldn't be disheartened. And if anything, that would validate the claims that he should go up in trip and would probably force me to go in again for the Ryanair Chase as an anti-post wager, because I just think 2.5 will be his kind of niche trip. He enjoys the track, and I look forward to seeing him. He's got some very smart form from last season. He convincingly beat Mellon. Obviously, he won the Drinmore and was just touched off by Put the Kettle On the Arkle, and seems to be kind of bubbling under a little bit forgotten in a lot of the kind of anti-post discussions. But yeah, Fakir Du Dairy for Jose O'Brien, Ryanair Chase that'd be my tip there.
Andy, what do you make of that Arkle form?
Yeah, tremendous. I mean, I put the kettle on. I think it was in that period when we were in lockdown. I did those anti-post previews way in advance, basically, because I was trying to fill a bit of time and obviously give some column inches to everyone when we all had nothing to look at. So I spent a hell of a lot of time, a hell of a lot of research, going back through all the Cheltenham races, and I thought Put the Kettle On was as Ed's already said, kind of like the forgotten horse. It was the forgotten race, but the time figure, the Arca, was very good. So I thought 25-1 for Put the Kettle On at the time was an insult, and given the subsequent exploits of not only her but all those ones in behind, like Fakadou, well, not Fakadou race, but Bruce Vif and several others in the race, it's looking a race where people perhaps ought to take a little bit more notice or give it a bit more respect. But I certainly do rate Fakadou race. I think the only reason he ran in the Arca last year is because it was heavy, and they thought, well, 2.5 miles on heavy at this stage of his career, not necessarily, but we'll take a chance that his stamina comes through. And if he hadn't made that bad mistake at a crucial moment, I think he probably would have won the Arca. I don't think they'll go down the Arca route this year. I think that they'll go over 2.5 miles. He's going to be running against the likes of Sam Crow, Mellon, and Fahine, and all those horses that took part, of course, in the Marsh Chase. So that division is in safe hands. It's a very competitive division. And then you chuck in Imperial Aura and Simply the Bets, and I think we're going to have a genuine good 2.5 mile category this year. But yeah, he's a horse I've always liked ever since he won his maiden hurdle at Cork, and he clocked a big number, and I tipped him for the Supreme Novices Hurdle. He's a horse I've always got a bit of time for. He's always clocked very good times.
Interesting. We're getting on to the final picks now for the horses to follow. And Andy, your last one, I mean, the last horse you spoke about was a Henry de Bromhead maiden hurdler who had made an impressive start to their career over hurdles, and rinse and repeat for this one, Irascible.
Yeah, this is the one that I don't think many UK punters who are going to tune into this podcast, including Ed. I think if he helped put his hand on his heart, he probably wouldn't have heard of Irascible. But he'll be remembering him probably the other side of Christmas. I think this horse has got an absolute shed load of talent. The day when he won at Clonmel on his hurdling debut, I literally couldn't believe where he came from to win. But the time figure he did was just sensational, and the back end sectional work was really good as well. I like the way he finished his race off. He absolutely charged up the hill. It takes him getting that uphill run at Clonmel. He beat Stable Companion, horse called Decimation. I've got some really solid form going into the race. And it's interesting that Henry de Bromhead got this horse in the Royal Bond in another week or so's time. So he's obviously clearly thinking that way, that this horse is a graded horse. And I'm pretty sure that he is already on the back of what I've got him doing. I'm hoping that this fella slots in between the three that I'm going to choose. I think She Wears It Well stays in over 2 miles. I'm hoping Holy Macapone goes up to 3 miles. And I've got this one right in the middle because he's won over 2. Excuse me. But I think he's probably looking more like a 2.5 mile horse. Whether he's quite good to beat a She Wears It Well over, in a strong run 2 miles on a flat track, I'd have my doubts. I think 2.5 miles, I think you'll really see what this horse is about. Again, another Henry de Bromhead horse has got an absolute bundle of scope, loads of potential. He's in safe hands with Henry. In Henry we trust, as it were. So yeah, it was a toss of the coin really. Which one I left out? Ballyadam, Irascible, She Wears It Well. But in the end, I went for one that everyone knows about Ballyadam. But I thought this one in particular was the darkest one of the 5 that I've got.
Irascible, no prices as of yet for the Ballymore, goes alongside what Andy was saying about going under the radar, but maybe that won't be the case for too long. And you made a pretty good case maybe for an early novice hurdle Trixie at Cheltenham. We're going to be having a proper Cheltenham anti-post podcast and video, I think, in about a month or so. So this is kind of a bit of a light one, I guess. And before we get on to Ed's final pick, we have a giveaway for the watchers of this show on YouTube. Our friends at Timeform have given us 3 copies of their Horses to Follow book for the 2020-2021 jump season. And if you want one, just comment on the YouTube video below and we will select 3 winners at random. So you can get the Timeform Horses to Follow book. If you're watching this, that surely means you are interested in which horses to follow, as Ed and Andy are telling us now. So do comment below for your chance to win a free book from Timeform for their Horses to Follow as well. Ed, now this is the final one, and we saw Andy throw in a bit of a curveball there with Irascible, and fair to say, my notes here for your final selection, Your Darling, it just says expensive horse to follow.
Absolutely. No, yeah, you make a good case in that sense, George. You go back to this horse's debut in a bumper when he actually wiped the floor with Flint to Sacro. It was a horse who went straight to everyone's notebooks, didn't he? Since then, the wheels have just come off in spectacular fashion, haven't they? Was pulled up when sent off 4-6 on his next start in a Warwick bumper, but that was at the time when all Ben Pauling's horses had the big issues. I think it was a dodgy batch of hay was blamed, wasn't he? He shut the yard down for a month, and everything was just totally wrong there. So I can forgive that run. Then he made his hurdling debut at Huntingdon in October. Didn't run badly at all, I thought. He looked a bit stuffy. Finished third. But the key run is last time out at Sandown. Anyone who saw that Sandown maiden hurdle, the race was absolutely bonkers in the fact that Your Darling had every other horse totally cooked, it would appear, as he turned into the home straight. Nico de Boinville had not moved a muscle, and then the horse just stopped in a hole. If you stopped the race as they turned into the home straight and said this horse should be beaten 23 lengths, you'd think you were getting the races mixed up. Just totally emptied. And I was like flummoxed really on the back of that. I thought, there's clearly something going wrong here. Now, I'm pleased in a way they've found the ready-made excuse, if you like. Nico de Boinville got straight off and said the horse made a massive noise. There's clearly a problem with his wind. We've got to get something done. So he's going off for a wind operation. 3/4 of that race, even 80% of that race, he looked a graded horse in the making. He moved, he jumped well, he moved with class, he travelled, and then he just stopped. And the horse that beat him, I don't think won that race, isn't bad at all. Adrimal, I believe he's going on to the Challow Hurdle, the Tom Lacey representative. But I was waiting for a handicap mark for this horse on the basis of that. Now, I was in around 130, and I thought the pooling team would be doing cartwheels with that. If he gets given 130, has his wind up, and they can prove. He's been given a mark of 117. I've spat my skinny muck all over the laptop screen. I cannot believe this. If he lines up in a novice handicap hurdle, I'd love. They've got options now. What they could do with this? I mean, it's almost too low for something like the Betfair hurdle. But crikey almighty, this Windop has done the trick. He's a stone plus well in on that. Clearly, the horse travelled like a good thing to last time, and then he clearly stopped like a horse who had an ailment, not a horse who was wanting through lack of ability. And he is becoming a little bit of a horse you've got to forgive, but he's just been running so well and then stopping. It's just become apparent to me now that there's something preventing him from showing his best. Now, the wind operation, be it next time out or the time after, has its effect, and that does clear up the problem. I'd be shocked if he's not any miles better than a horse in 117. I mean, Henrietta Knight, who sourced the horse, said he's the most impressive horse she'd ever picked up at the sales, from whatever that's worth. But he's clearly a horse who's, as I say, an expensive purchase. Clearly got a lot of ability. The way he won his bumper against Flint Sacra, I think, was he about second or third favourite for the Spring Novices at the moment, Flint Sacra, isn't he? The way he travelled through that race and won that bumper, he looked like a really, really top prospect. And I just think his breathing's been preventing him from showing his best. And I just cannot for the life of me believe he's been given 117. So I will be keeping really close eye on what they do with him, whether they go over the novice route again, or that's what I immediately thought. I thought perhaps they'll go for there's that good novice hurdle at Kempton on the 27th, I think it is. It's been won by some decent horse over here. Mr. Fisher won it a couple of years ago, and if the cat fits and things. But I think they've got to go down the handicap route off that mark now. So he's not one with Cheltenham in mind. I mean, he could end up being a real left of field selection. I think he's about 66s for the Supreme. He could kind of move into that class in time, but in a more immediate future, Your Darling, whenever he's in a handicap, I'm going to have a serious look.
Your Darling, SPs of 9-2, 4-6, 15-8, and 7-4. Now, whilst the performances may not have justified those starting prices, often when horses are going off that short, it might mean that something is amiss. And I think Ed there has maybe explained why, and off a mark of 117, an interesting one to keep a good close eye on ahead of some handicaps. That brings us to an end of the Odds Checker Horses to Follow podcast and video. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to watch these or find these podcasts on any podcast platform. I think we have about 6 scheduled over the coming weeks, so do keep an eye out there for plenty of racing content and others. I'm just going to quickly run through each of your 5 horses now. Andy had Imperial Aura, Holy Macapony, The Big Getaway, She Wears It Well, and Irascible. Ed pitching for Fiddlerontheroof, Elixir, Daney, Thomas Darby, Fakir Dudaries, and Your Darling. So 10 horses there to put into your notebook, and a couple of other mentions for ones that Andy has already tipped. So thank you guys very much for taking the time to speak to us today, and looking forward to speaking again soon.